Remember when TV shows used to have more than 8 episodes a season? I do. That's why I rewatched Transformers Prime before the release of what will likely be the hit Transformers movie since, I don't know, Age of Extinction?
I'm an inventor!
When I started my rewatch of Transformers Prime, I couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia. Yeah, that's right. This is a nostalgia-based video. Aren't you excited? Me too. I'm just joking, but in all seriousness, Transformers has been a part of my life for years. It was one of the main 3 interests I had in my adolescence. Star Wars, Transformers, and Pirates of the Caribbean were my carousel of excitement in life. As you've surely seen with Star Wars,
Hello.
I like to hyper-obsess, and man, did I grow up in the time to be hyper-obsessed with Transformers. When I was like 11, 12, and 13, I grew up in the prime years. See what I did there? It's a pun. That's gonna be the last one. Maybe. Anyways, prime years to be a Transformers fan. In 2010, we just had Revenge of the Fallen, which I saw 4 times in theaters. If you watched any other video on this channel, that's rookie numbers. My poor mother, she's a saint for taking me, but I wanted to see it 4 times, and it was really good. Now, a lot of people hate Revenge of the Fallen, but my 9-year-old brain went bananas over Optimus Prime going apeshit in a forest. Also, in 2009 was the finale of the 3-season show called Transformers Animated. So following Revenge of the Fallen and Transformers Animated, 2010 dropped 2 installments of the franchise that I fell in love with. There was the War for Cybertron game for the PS3 and Transformers Prime. Initially, in preparation for Transformers 1, I wanted to talk about War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron because I adore them. They should have been movies. They're 2 of the very few games I've ever completed. See that I haven't streamed Star Wars Outlaws in 2 weeks. Sorry guys.
Yeah, I like this idea. I want a spaceship too. What's this do? Oh! Oh!
But as it turns out, those 2 games are, well, video games, and this is Penti Patrol Cinema. So that brought me back to Transformers Prime, a series I adored, made edits for. Here's my proof. I made this with my iPhone 4, and yes, I also cried to this too. Upon my rewatch, I found that Team Prime hits just as hard, and the show is just as enjoyable as it was when I was a kid. The story of Transformers Prime isn't just about making a cool TV show for kids and fans of the Transformers series. It was the beginning of an entirely different continuity. Apparently, the people at Hasbro didn't think too favorably of the whole Fallen thing from Revenge of the Fallen, so they went ahead to start a new continuity, referred to as the Aligned Continuity or Canon. In the years before the MCU redefined movie franchises for the rest of Hollywood, Transformers and Hasbro were building their own original universe. The Aligned Canon differed from the Bayverse. While Michael Bay was finishing up his trilogy with Dark of the Moon and didn't plan on doing any other Transformers work, before the magic wand of money was waved before his eyes alongside the whole Pain and Gain 2 deal, Transformers had a future planned out here. Okay, side note, that whole Michael Bay thing is kind of funny. Bay didn't want to return to Transformers after Dark of the Moon. He was finished, but he also wanted money to make Pain and Gain 2. So he was given a deal to make a movie or 2, blah blah blah, the last night happened. On the other side of things, the entire way the Aligned Universe was initially supposed to be set up was multiple TV shows in the same universe. This would be Prime and Rescue Bots. On top of those 2 shows, they'd have the video game universe, which would tie into it, with War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron maintaining a past element to the story. There were books in the works from this as well, which came in the form of Exodus and Exiles. None of that happened though. Well, it kinda did. There was apparently a lot of internal drama at Hasbro, conflicting visions, and a struggle between studio heads in trying to tie things together. High Moon Studios, the creators of the Cybertron games, were on board with the continuity in the same universe, but the Prime creators weren't. Rescue Bots weren't supposed to be in the continuity, it just kinda ended up fitting in. Because Prime was cancelled in 2013, the entire idea for the alignment continuity fell apart. The Cybertron games ended by trying to slip into the Bayformers canon with an in-canon tie-in, even though the movies had a really convoluted past that changed from the movie to movie, and the games didn't fit that. And so while all this information is relatively unimportant, I think it's very interesting how Transformers could have been in ties with the MCU. It never would have been as big, simply because these were TV shows aimed at kids, with a couple video games and books, which were fairly popular in all fairness. But Hasbro had ideas to bring other properties into the aligned continuity. Kind of like what they're doing with Rise of the Beasts, if that sequel is ever getting announced. Oh, it is, okay. And it'll be a crossover. Rad. It is kind of funny that Transformers could have a technically worse track record with cinematic universes than the DCU. If Rise of the Beasts doesn't generate a solid return from its sequel, it'd be the third failure for Transformers, which would be a shame. It is still kind of funny how The Last Knight is a movie that baits a bunch of cinematic starts that never actually came. Like Hasbro had a whole plan because they had money in their eyes after Age of Extinction. Maybe we'll talk about Bayformers another time, but now that we talked about Prime and kind of how it got started and where it kind of sits in the alignment continuity, it's time to talk about the show itself. Something that I love about series like the Clone Wars, Transformers Prime, and Star Wars Rebels is that they set the tone. Both Rebels and Clone Wars take a hot moment to get us started into the actual stakes of the show. With Rebels, we don't see something truly horrific until Master Luminar Unduli is found dead, and in the Clone Wars, the first war crime doesn't come for a couple episodes. But Transformers Prime doesn't hold back. This show actually started the trend of making sure Cliffjumper gets executed in every iteration of existence.
You deserve a better death.
Turns out they got The Rock, yeah, that Rock, to play Cliffjumper for an entire episode. Side note, I'm really glad that Cliffjumper is not just a red version of Bumblebee in this. He's like his own actual bot until he gets murked by Starscream in the first few minutes of the first episode. It's genuinely jarring. The first Autobot you meet is thrown around and killed without a sense of mercy. After his death, he's turned into a literal zombie and killed again. But it really sets the tone of the series, and I think that was something that makes Transformers Prime stand out to me. This show, unlike Transformers Animated and even G1, knows how to hammer down on the realism of the war between Autobots and Decepticons. It's a show that really understands the gravitas of the situation, and I think that is why it's so important to mention the actual external creation of the show. Even though the creator's story didn't align with the Cybertron games, the backstory for the Prime universe is super juicy. And so once the stakes are established, the show really sets itself apart from the Bayformer universe. When I was young, I was really stupid, like most kids. But the difference between the Bayformers, the Prime universe, and the Cybertron games was that they were easily defined for me. I always assumed the Cybertron games bled into the Generation 1 universe, but technically they didn't because the Dinobots were on Cybertron before the whole Earth thing, and after Transformers Prime was ended, there was a whole dreaded Darkspark game, which we don't talk about. But because the Bayformers had a constantly changing backstory, first the Allspark, that was a secret relic, then the ancient alien theorists from the History Channel discovered the pyramids were actually a star harbinger or something.
So we're half human and half extraterrestrial. We're hybrids.
And then there was a whole arc that crashed on the Pink Floyd album. Not to mention Age of Extinction and Last Knight's whatever's going on there. But then you really come around to Transformers Prime, and there's a full-blown story for the war for Cybertron, and it feels fitting for the universe. It actually is my personal favorite backstory for the war from the Earth perspective. In Generation 1, we find that the Autobots are leaving the planet because their Energon resources have run low, and they were in dire need of Energon to survive. They fled Cybertron because the war had run its course. In the Prime universe, we learn that the planet was killed. It is a dead world. Primus went dormant, and Cybertron was uninhabitable. This backstory carries into the relationship between Optimus and Megatron. The fact that Orion Pax and Megatronus were friends and allies is something that makes the breaking of their bond feel all the more tragic. In past iterations, especially the Bayformers, there is this notion that they were brothers once, but Optimus doesn't really seem to care.
Time to find out.
He rips Megatron's head off in Dark of the Moon.
We were brothers once.
He kicks him out of a floating piece of grass in The Last Knight, and really shows little regard for him in the face of combat. The Prime version of Optimus is still latching on to the Megatronus he knew before the Great War that ravaged their homeworld, and it humanizes the bots. It makes their conflict feel relatable, and that aspect feels present throughout the entire series. There's also the 13 original Primes, one of which was Optimus, which is a whole different story that I will tell later. But having had such an in-depth lore as the background for the series makes the war on Earth feel a whole lot more connected. It brings forth a history that feels present at each interaction, especially for those between Optimus and Megatron. I think that aspect is most prevalent in this show than in any other iteration of Transformers. Thanks to such a crazy rich history, it gives the stakes of the series real precedent. Every season finale feels like it could be the end of Team Prime, and the show doesn't withhold its heartbreaking and jarring instances. The Season 1 finale comes with Optimus losing his memory and returning to his status as Orion Pax, the clerk from Iacon. In Season 2, Optimus is seconds away from becoming one with the Allspark, and Season 3 ends with Megatron's temporary death and the restitution of Cybertron. The war between Autobots and Decepticons always feels in motion, and I think part of this is because the fight for the bots always feels so desperate, and the Decepticons always feel prepared, despite their numbers dropping and increasing. I do personally like that Prime gives the Autobots mindless drones to fight and destroy or foot soldiers. The Decepticons have worker bots and regular seekers, and they're both shown throughout the show. Team Prime never targets the worker bots, but they destroy the seekers and foot soldiers throughout their various missions, which I really do enjoy, because in past iterations of Transformers like Generation 1 or animated from 2007, the Decepticons and Autobots would come together, beat each other into submission, and then run away and come back again for next week's battle. It's fun and enjoyable, especially until all your favorite Autobots are gunned down inside of a starship. But in Transformers Prime, you never really know if they're going to die, if they're going to survive, or get injured, because Prime executes the stakes for the team especially well. They have multiple members that make mistakes, that endanger their lives, like RC and Optimus almost freeze in the Arctic, or the bots getting eaten up by scraplets. In other circumstances, one of the children, like Raph, almost end up dying, or when Ratchet gets his head caved in by Megatron when he was infused with synthetic energon. I think Prime matches the kid-friendly nature of every other previous Transformers installment with the grittiness of the Bayverse. It just doesn't really cross that line that Michael Bay movies do. Something that really sets Prime apart from the other iterations of Transformers is their usage of zombies. This was bound to happen though. Famous YouTuber Pointless Hub deemed this era as the zombie era.
Between 2007 and 2013 as the zombie era.
For whatever reason, culturally, we decided that zombies were the coolest thing ever during the first 3 years of the 2010s.
Zombie!
Remember all those YouTube videos on the perfect zombie survival shelter? I do. I binged all of them because my 12-year-old brain was worried about how I'd survive the undead scourge. And the Transformers Prime universe decided, hey, that's a cool fad, let's do zombie robots. And then they did. I'm kind of 50-50 on the whole zombie thing in general. Like, World War Z is dumb, but I like it. Call of Duty Zombies, tons of fun. Walking Dead? Never really got into it. Also, I have nightmares involving zombies constantly, so I don't really like them because of that. I also had a Planet of the Apes themed zombie dream, which was the worst. My point being, I don't really care about them in general, but in Transformers Prime it kinda works, and it adds an extra dimension that really isn't present anywhere else in the entirety of the franchise. Using dark energon to erect the armies of the undead bots is crucial throughout each season of the show. It's even the main plot point for the Predacons Rising movie that ends the entirety of Transformers Prime. I think having zombies adds to the entire vibe of the show, because aside from various battlefields across Earth that tie Primus and Unicron, or Cybertron and Earth, to each other, there is this extra layer of what will happen to whom. When Megatron dies, he's resurrected as Megatron. Then he dies in Season 3 and comes back in Predacons Rising as Galvanerd or whatever, which is like Unicron but not, but kinda is. Breakdown and Skyquake are killed, then they're both resurrected, but their return goes much differently from Megatron's. Skyquake is an interdimensional zombie that gets stuck between two space bridges, and Breakdown is turned into basically a headmaster for Silas. And like I said earlier with Cliffjumper, he's turned into a zombie before fully getting executed and yeeted off a ledge by RC by accident. These different results always leave some curiosity to what will happen to the bots when they die on screen, and in my opinion adds to the tone of the show. I'm not going to be one of those people who is like, everything made for kids should be John Wick, so let's not go there. But Prime doesn't do what Robots in Disguise 2015 does. If you've seen it, you get it. If not, let's just move on and forget I said anything. Something that is cool about Prime is that it doesn't talk down to its audience. The dialogue is filled to the brim with thesaurus-level words, but it really adds to the maturity of the show. It doesn't force itself to play dumb, for a lack of a better word, and I personally really enjoy that aspect. As a kid, a lot of those words went over my head, but when I watched through, it was like, damn, they kinda cooked. Additionally, Prime makes some incredible references that I didn't get my first watch through when I was a kid, and I got as an adult. Like, there are direct references to G1 and Bayformers. Episode 13 of Season 1 is basically the Cosmic Rust from the Generation 1, and Episode 16 is Bulkhead turning into Sam Witwicky from Revenge of the Fallen.
Self-repeats itself, kick counter, kick counter, kick counter, kick.
Or how about Ratchet's rant about the humans shooting the Autobots off into space, like they did in the hit 2011 movie Dark of the Moon. Sea Spray from Generation 1 is referenced in another clip with Wheeljack.
How is old barnacle butt?
Or, just to list off a couple direct parallels, Optimus and Megatron fighting in Egypt like they did in Revenge of the Fallen. Megatron's resting place at the bottom of the ocean, like Revenge of the Fallen, Starscream's fighter kill in the 2007 movie. All really cool references. For a series about robots in disguise on Earth, Prime makes sure that every battle and environment feels different. There are some repeat locations and environments like the Arctic Brawls or Energon Mine showdowns, but each battle comes with weight. It also depends on who's present, but each of the bots on each side of the fight have their own unique presence and fighting style. I think the physical weight is so necessary, and I think it's also why this show really, honestly, might be the best Transformers show in terms of fighting. As I said earlier, in G1, the bots all ran in, they had a monster mash, then they got tired, ran away, recharged for next week's encounter. But the Autobots here really put the damage in on the cons, whether it's cutting off heads, ripping out internal organs, or anything in between. Their fights are vicious. I just mentioned fighting style, and it complements the warriors individually perfectly. RC, light and fast. Bumblebee, a bit more of the same, but heavier with his strikes. Ratchet is old. Bulkhead is hulking and brute. And Optimus is extremely powerful. Optimus in this show reminds me of the Jaeger from Pacific Rim, the first one. This complements his fighting against Megatron a lot. Rarely do we see Megatron get involved in fights, but when we do, he feels like a gladiator from the pits of Chaos. And I don't cheer for Decepticons, but when Megatron takes on all of Team Prime in Episode 3 of Season 2, he really feels unstoppable. And it also gives this extra emphasis on Optimus' strength for the Autobots. He's not Megatron and never has been, but the fact that he's the only individual to handle Megatron is proof of his importance. The pure fear his opponent has once he's realized Prime is no longer Orion Pax is perfect. This moment is very similar to his Season 3 fight against Megatron upon his return. I've never personally been a big fan of the Beast Hunter's iteration of Optimus, just from the series, because I prefer the leaner, smaller look, but I love that when he gets his massive physical upgrade, he feels more and equal to Megatron than not. The inclusion of the Wreckers and Smokescreen is also really epic, because there's an extra level of unpredictability in every battle, because the Rookie might do something dumb, the Wreckers might decide to blow up a mineshaft like his revenge. But I believe that the Rock'em Sock'em robots of Transformers Prime have some of the most unique battle POVs in the entire franchise. Like Dark of the Moon has a really cool Optimus scene, and the Bayverse movies are honestly full of these exciting action-packed scenes. But the way the battles are shot in Transformers Prime is honestly refreshing. It reminds me of all the Dutch angles in the early seasons of the Clone Wars. One of my favorite changes to a character is how Shockwave is presented in this show. He's not just a lab rat who has a big cannon on his arm, he is a monster. He's sort of like Megatron and Bulkhead, and I love him for that. Aside from the action-packed scenes of Prime, there's also a level of humor that I think needs to be present for a Transformers show. The original series is filled with jokes until the 1986 movie, where half the original cast is murdered. There is of course the reoccurring joke of Ratchet's "I needed that," which is repeated throughout the show.
Bulkhead, I needed that! I needed that! I needed that! We needed that.
I needed that!
And then some individual moments like Starscream throwing Knockout under the bus, which is probably the funniest scene in all of Transformers.
Allow me to handle this.
It's Knockout's fault! Precisely my what?!
Team Prime is comprised of one of the best squads to date. The G1 series had everyone, which I don't think is fair to compare to that team. The animated series had most of the same squad, trading RC out for Prowl, and we don't talk about Robots in Disguise. The main squad of RC, Bumblebee, Ratchet, Bulkhead, and Optimus is perfect. It's kind of like the squad from the 2007 movie.
Sam Witwicky, you hold the key to Earth's survival.
Replacing Bulkhead for Ironhide and RC for Jazz. I like that the small squad eventually grows with Smokescreen, and a true solid model for Ultra Magnus, and of course Wheeljack. To say the squad is unique would be a bit far-fetched if I'm being honest, just because the main players of Ratchet, Prime, and Bumblebee are all there, and the small scrappy fighter and the heavy-duty wrecker are interchanged across mediums. Jazz, RC, and Prowl with Bulkhead, Ironhide, and Bulkhead again, or maybe Hound from Age of Extinction.
I'm like a fat ballerina that takes scalps and slits throats.
The personality of Team Prime, on the other hand, is where they thrive. Each of the characters go through their own arcs throughout the show, and it really makes the whole series worth it. This aspect makes Prime and Star Wars Rebels really stand out for me. I personally really love small interworking family dynamics in both series. Because the Autobots all play off each other really well, it makes the entire side of the Autobots feel like the good guys. They aren't backstabbing and petty, they are always on the same side, and their emotions feel very human. The care they grow for their human counterparts really ties it all together. While I've never been a big personal fan of Autobot and human dynamics, the Prime team makes those alliances and friendships feel right. Sam and Bumblebee was like this whole protector thing that I didn't really like, and they tried to do the dad of the group thing with Marky Mark and war criminal Optimus Prime in Age of No Dinobots, but in Prime, these dynamics work. Optimus always seems to connect with one human, and I think it's cool that while he has connections with all the human characters, he trusts Jack the most, and sees him like an honorary Prime. It just allows the group to feel natural, and even a lot like a family throughout the course of the show. Optimus Prime is 100% the focus of the show, and I'd even say the main protagonist. Despite him being in the background and maybe not even having the largest speaking role, it's his quiet leadership that is felt the most. In a show called Transformers Prime, it's no surprise that Optimus is the most challenged amongst the crew. Similar to the Transformers animated Prime, Optimus in this series has the most growth. Unlike in the animated series, Prime's Optimus is a leader. He's established himself as such, and is confident. His past is also very interesting. In the alignment continuity, Optimus, literal Optimus Prime, was one of the original 13 Primes created by the god Primus. Optimus put Unicron into stasis, and he himself died or something, and was reborn on Cybertron as Orion Pax. Because Orion was one of the 13 original Primes, he was destined to become Optimus again, which is why he does, and why he puts Unicron back into stasis, returns as Optimus, and then traps Unicron, and restores life to Cybertron. Something that I also think is really interesting is how they decide to mix Peter Cullen's voice in the show. In the show, he's a lot more lighter, and he doesn't have such a bassy undertone like he does in the Bayverse. If you compare these two clips side by side, you can really hear that difference.
We are autonomous robotic organisms from the planet Cybertron. We are autonomous robotic organisms from the planet Cybertron.
And I think it's in that difference that Optimus really works in this show for me, is that he's deep, bassy, but doesn't come off as too warrior-esque, I suppose. His history as Orion Pax also becomes a crucial plot point in future seasons of the show, which makes his backstory feel all the more rewarding. I do love that the show, Prime, ends with Optimus having the ultimate sacrifice. While each season has him kind of building up to it with various sacrifices, they never feel overdone or overplayed. Optimus makes his mistakes, but he overcomes them with triumph. And when the music is going like this and Optimus is saying his stuff, I'm like, suit me up. It might not be Optimus Prime and Linkin Park, but I'll still take it because this sacrifice, the end of Transformers Prime, so good, it's so good.
It has been my honor to lead you. On this day, the fates of two worlds hang in the balance, and the battle to come may very well be our last. But for Earth,
in a series like the Bayformers, or like Godzilla, where the big things doing big things is overshadowed by human problems, I typically get annoyed. Very infrequently does that happen in this show. Jack, Miko, Agent Fowler, Ralph, and June are all pretty great, and I truthfully like each of them. They can have their moments, but overall, their existence in the show doesn't drown out the actual Autobots and Decepticons. One of my biggest issues with Marky Mark and Shia LaBeouf is that their human drama supersedes the war between the big robots. Remember Godzilla 2014, when you went to the movie to see the big lizard be big and lizardy, and then you finally get to the action and then the doors close? That's what the Bayformers can feel like sometimes, focusing on Sam or Inventor Guy's world instead of the bots. Transformers Prime accomplishes human drama and bot toils with a true sense of balance, but it also focuses more on the bots themselves, which makes it more rewarding for me. There are great scenes in the Bayverse, and I feel like they are often undercut by human intervention. That brings me back to Transformers Prime. They do have similar moments, but in all the season finales, the bots are the main focus. Optimus vs. Unicron in Season 1, the destruction of Autobot Base in Season 2, and Megatron's death in Season 3, and the movie ending with Unicron's entrapment, and not a single sight of the humans. However, there is one issue with the humans that I do have. Despite all the love I just gave to Prime for accomplishing a show not focused on humans, there is one I absolutely abhor. I do not like Silas. Maybe that's the point, but I don't like him at all. so much so that I refuse to watch the episodes with him in it. Mostly because I know he captures Breakdown, I know he works with Starscream and Arachnid, also his death is valid as hell, which is deserved, because I hate him. His turning into freaking Frankenstein before dying a zombie transformer to Spider Lady Arachnid is freaking nuts. So despite me getting temperamental with Silas and Mech, I really do like the humans, just not those humans. The first episode Mech appears in, they're cool. After that, don't care about them. The main human leads are also great, by the way. They each add a dynamic to the squad. Ralph is the expert hacker that is basically Lester from GTA, Jack is an honorary prime, and Miko becomes a wrecker and even has a brawl in the finale. They have a purpose, like Noah from Rise of the Beasts, and even Charlie and Alina. It feels like they have something to offer. Sam and Lennox do sometimes, but Jack, Miko, and Ralph are probably the best human characters in the franchise. Debate below. I love Decepticons. You love Decepticons. Decepticons love Decepticons. Wait, no they don't.
What?
They hate each other, and the intermingling between Megatron's pawns is honestly pretty enjoyable. I love how Shockwave and Soundwave are long-term allies that never lose their roles or have them questioned. Megatron's Decepticon army is built on a lie, one for conquest and control over Cybertron. His loyal servants are always at his will. But when it comes to members like Starscream, Dreadwing, and Arachnid, maybe even Knockout, the name Decepticon feels all the more fitting. Throughout every iteration of Transformers, Starscream and Megatron have this unique dynamic of powerhouse warrior and scroungy coward. It's always interesting and funny, and while nothing will beat the dynamic between G1 Megatron and Starscream,
You can't keep me in here, Megatron!
Transformers Prime is a close second for me. Prime Starscream has an inner monologue that he speaks aloud, and it ends up being used as both a plot device and also a use of comedy. I think Prime balances the comedic aspect of the Decepticons and also their evil nature very well. In the Bayverse, they're very brooding and evil. I'd even say the same could be said for the Cybertron games. But in Prime, they're a very solid midpoint between classic G1 Decepticons and some of the more mature ones we saw during the late 2000s and early 2010s. As I mentioned before, the handling of Megatron's arc is super fascinating, and it makes him a very comprehensive villain. The dichotomy between Bayverse Megatron and Prime Megatron is really kind of apparent. While yes, their arcs end the same, literally, Megatronus of Prime feels like an individual wronged, but evil at heart. His redemption feels kind of earned, because of his constant struggle with Dark Energon. But a part of me wishes he would have been present for Optimus' sacrifice, because they were brothers at one point. Also, I love how he named himself after one of the 13 original Primes, and shortened it after his time as a gladiator. His backstory and transformation, in the Decepticon leader, feels so fitting and perfect in my opinion. The rest of the cons are similar to their G1 counterparts. The cons have always been a bunch of goobers, and Megatron is simply their babysitter. I love them. The constant backstabbing is perfectly balanced, especially with Starscream being the anchor of these betrayals. As for the military, I said earlier that I really liked how their fighting force proved capable and gave the Autobots something to actually destroy, but it made their odds feel overwhelming at many times, which is a good thing. I personally didn't really know that Robots in Disguise 2015 was a continuation of Prime. Like I did, but I didn't. I watched the first episode when I was like 14 or 15, I found myself too old for the target audience and just tuned out. Coming back, I learned so much about the alignment canon, and I find that both Fall of Cybertron and Prime, Predacons Rising, are both the perfect endings to both individual continuities within the same canon. Transformers, for me, has always had a sense of incompletion. Transformers Animated had a strong ending, and for me, Transformers Prime's ending was perfect. I loved it. But aside from Animated and Cybertron and Prime, I personally haven't felt completion from really any other continuities. The Bayverse died, taking a note from the Prime universe, with Unicron being Earth, but we'll never know how that story ends. G1 Season 4 is grueling for me to get through, personally. I just have no clue what's going on, ever. Robots in Disguise 2015 is definitely something that happened, and who knows what we'll get from Rise of Mr. Beast 2, or Transformers 1. I'm holding out hope, but still, the point remains. Darkspark is cursed in the Cybertron games. The Last Knight? Well, it certainly is.
You wretched human!
But Transformers Prime, Beast Wars, Predacons Rising, ain't that a mouthful, is the ending of all endings for Transformers. In the Dark of the Moon novelization, Megatron and Optimus become friends. In the movie, that doesn't happen because Michael Bay likes War Criminal Prime, which is fine. But it leaves much to be desired. Megatron's return and Predacon's rising is deserved. Maybe not played out for long, but it feels right. He wanted to die, and now that he's alive, he doesn't want to oppress. It doesn't end with his head being ripped off of his shoulders by Optimus for no reason. The true enemy in the universe, Unicron, mortal enemy of Primus and therefore Cybertron, was defeated. Again, by Optimus Prime. The main character of the series, Prime himself, carries the weight of all Cybertronians. After his failures, his successes, his heroic speeches, and everything in between, Optimus and Team Prime, including one more, Knockout,
well, I never really had the best role models,
gather around the entrance to the Well of Sparks. Optimus, in an effort to stop Unicron and save Primus, embeds himself with the life force of the Allspark, and it joins with the matrix of leadership. The two can no longer be apart. The era of Primes would come to an end, but with it is the rebirth of their planet, the end of their wars. Optimus sends one final goodbye, and I'm crying again. He hasn't even reached Primus, and the tears are flowing. It's perfect. Peter Cullen is remarkable. All the voice actors are, but this moment is single-handedly one of the best in any form, variation, continuity, or version of Transformers. As I wrote this video, I myself realized that Transformers Prime might just be some of the best Transformers we've ever gotten. In the end, it ends in a way only deserving for Optimus Prime. A future that looks hopeful. Not you. And one where the legacy of the leader of the Autobots is one that is bringing life back to Cybertron. One where the Transformers and humans can coexist in the galaxy. One where Unicron is defeated and Primus breathes again. And one that, to me, is perfection. If you like Transformers and Star Wars, I just posted this crossover on PPSW. Otherwise, if you like Transformers and me, you know what to do.